Apple MacBook Pro review, hands-on. The screen is beautiful, but it doesn't go as edge-to-edge as you can get with a lot of Windows laptops these days. There are 4 Thunderbolt 3/USB-C ports, even on the smaller 13-inch version, which means you can't escape dongles, and you can't have a power cord that magnetically attaches. Don't trip on the power cable. It's still incredibly well built and feels like it's carved from a single piece of aluminum. It's also thinner than most Pro Windows laptops with powerful processors. Thinness has become a point of contention because it makes the laptop more complicated to cool. But it's undeniable that, as a physical object, this thing is really nice to carry around. There are a bunch of other improvements to the MacBook Pro. Chief among them is a new T2 chip, which controls a bunch of the internal mechanics of this computer. It allows Apple to add new iOS-esque features like a TrueTone display, which adjusts the color temperature of the screen and the touch bar to match the ambient light in a room. In our testing, it did just that, though it was awfully hard to tell the difference on the touch bar. Display, TrueTone makes a difference. On the surface, the 13-inch display, 2560 x 1600 pixels, on the 2018 MacBook Pro doesn't look any different, but with TrueTone turned on, the screen is easier on the eyes. That's because the system leverages a dedicated sensor to dynamically change the whitepoint on the display to match the color temperature in the room. The result can be a more yellowish tint to things like Google Docs, but that actually makes for more comfortable viewing. You can always toggle this setting on or off in System Preferences if it proves distracting. Otherwise, the Retina display on this MacBook is just as good as its predecessor. Touch bar, it works. The touch bar above the keyboard also gets the TrueTone treatment to match the main display. This mini touchscreen, 2170 x 60 pixels, does come in handy at times, such as for using music controls in the Spotify app, scrubbing through images with your finger in the Photos app, and picking a favorite site to launch in Safari by touching its icon. But a couple of years after Apple launched Touch Bar, I see this feature as nice to have and not a must-have. For what it's worth, though, this is the only feature on this $2,500 machine that made my kids ooh and ah. Performance, this is crazy fast. It's rare that I don't believe the results coming out of our lab, but in this case I had to do a double take. Based on our file copy test, which involves duplicating 4.97 GB worth of files, the 2018 MacBook Pro has the fastest SSD I've ever seen in a laptop. It took the system just 2 seconds to complete this task, which translates to 2,519 megabytes per second. Incredulous, we found another synthetic benchmark to test the SSD called Blackmagic Disk Speed Test. The result? An average write speed of 2,682 Mbps. The SSDs in competing Windows ultraportables are 6 times slower, with the otherwise speedy Dell XPS 13 offering 399.4 Mbps and the average premium laptop hitting 279.3 Mbps. With its 8th gen, quad-core Core i7 processor and 16 GB of RAM, the 13-inch MacBook Pro also smoked the competition on Geekbench 4, which measures overall performance. Apple's laptop scored 17,348. The next closest finisher, the XPS 13, notched 14,180, and the HP Spectre 13, 13,090, and the Huawei iMateBook X Pro, 12,913, were also far behind the MacBook Pro. To the nines. This has been my first chance to test a laptop with Intel's 8th gen, 6-core Core i9 CPU. Previously, the 15-inch Pro topped out at a 7th gen quad-core Core i7, itself no slouch, after the last line update in spring 2017. Compared to a 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro with a quad-core Core i7, the new 6-core Core i9 was significantly faster in the standard benchmark tests we ran, even before Apple patched the CPU throttling issue. But before Apple released the patch when setting up an intensive workload to deliberately push the system, we were able to easily cause the Core i9 CPU in our 2018 MacBook Pro to ping-pong its internal temperature and CPU clock speed up and down rapidly, in both video encoding and 3D gaming. Once Apple released the update, we installed it on our Core i9 15-inch MacBook Pro and repeated some of the same tests. The CPU throttling stopped, and the clock frequency of the CPU and internal system temperature both remained fairly stable, even when running a 4K video encode or a game set to maximum detail settings. In our standard benchmarks, which don't run long enough to have triggered the throttling issue, the pre- and post-patch performance was essentially identical. Bottom line: the 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar is not a laptop for the masses, by dint of its price but also its power. But if you're a creative pro or power user who demands a laptop that's fairly portable, this system should mostly satisfy. The speed alone is great, and having Hey Siri on board proved more convenient than I thought it would. The quieter keyboard is also a welcome improvement. However, the battery life on this ultra-premium system isn't as long as some competing ultra-portables. Windows laptops like the XPS 13HAVE surpassed Apple with their sleeker and lighter designs, and you can get more powerful graphics for hundreds of dollars less in systems like the Huawei MateBook X Pro. Both of those laptops also last longer on a charge. For this amount of dough, I also think Apple should offer a discrete GPU without requiring you to jump up to the 15-inch MacBook Pro. Overall, if you're a macOS person, the new 13-inch MacBook Pro is a smarter and faster powerhouse. MacBook Pro 2018 price and configurations, bring money. The 13-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar I reviewed starts at a steep $1,799 for a quad-core, 8th Gen Core i5 processor, 8GB of RAM and 256GB of SSD storage. For $1,999, you can up the SSD to 512GB. My gulp, $2,499 configuration includes a Core i7 processor, 16GB of RAM and a 512GB SSD. Note that jumping from a Core i5 to Core i7 CPU costs $300, and it's $200 each for doubling the RAM from 8GB and the SSD storage from 256GB when configuring your own system. On paper, it looked like an impressive, if predictable, set of internal component upgrades. Apple's 13-inch and 15-inch Touch Bar MacBook Pro models would get new 8th Gen Intel processors, more storage and RAM options, a color temperature sensing TrueTone screen and other tweaks, all nice improvements over a ho-hum 2017 update. At the same time, the slim unibody aluminum design would remain unchanged since its last design overhaul in late 2016, keeping features both loved, the giant trackpad, and not so loved, the slim travel keyboard, the USB-C only connections. If anything, the expensive add-on option for one of Intel's new 6-core Core i9 processors would appeal to pro-level users, such as video editors and 3D artists, who may be starting to feel that Apple isn't keeping up with their ever-expanding needs for high-end gear.